Providing a safe and secure water supply 24/7, 365 days a year is obviously a very big job. And sometimes it requires the help of outside personnel. Contractors who may only be at the water utility or construction site for a short period of time. Other contractors may be on site for months or even years, but they all have one thing in common. They are not full-time employees of the utility, and in many cases, they have not had the same training the rest of our utility employees have. Contractors and subcontractors provide many services at water utilities on jobs big and small. Large construction projects come to mind right away, but it's much more than that. Contractors are the delivery people who provide materials to the plant and field sites. Contractors include the consultants, electricians, painters, plumbers, HVAC, and many other specialists who provide temporary services. And contractors are the people who provide ongoing support for us, such as computer technicians or the cleaning crew who comes in at night while we're out of the office. While providing a very valuable service to the utility, contractors also present a potential risk. Although they are certainly qualified to complete their task at hand, they may not be aware of potential hazards that exist at many water utilities. Hazards different from what they encounter at other work locations. Utility managers put a lot of time and resources into making sure every water employee is aware of safety and security practices. That effort should be extended to contractors. Contractors working with a utility share in the responsibility to provide a safe water supply. They also share in the responsibility to maintain a safe working environment for all utility employees. And the contractor-utility relationship impacts the public's perception. While working for us, contractors are perceived to be utility employees. Their actions reflect directly on public opinion. If a contractor hits an electrical service line while digging on a water project, the public's perception is almost always the water utility department made a mistake. So how do we avoid their mistakes and the resulting blame? By providing contractors with the information they need to work safely on our job site, and by taking the time to find out just how safety-minded each and every contractor is. Contractors can be asked to provide a statement of policy regarding their safety program, but a contractor's safety program on paper is not enough. Safety performance should be measured and monitored. Some utilities pre-qualify contractors by examining their safety records. OSHA violations, incident rates, and workers' comp reports all contribute to the qualification process. Safety requirements can also be addressed in the initial contractor bidding and selection process. A clause can be inserted in the contract calling for termination for unacceptable contractor safety practices. Once a contractor has been accepted, it signals the start of an ongoing utility contractor safety partnership. In many cases, that means going back to the basics, utility safety practices we take for granted. Treat contractors like new employees and orient them to working at your facility. Make sure they have all of the safety resources at hand the rest of utility employees do. That includes the location of safety equipment such as fire extinguishers and first aid kits. Point out the location of material safety data sheets for any materials they may come in contact with on the job. Now, that's especially important at water plants since we use a number of chemicals and hazardous materials some contractors may not be familiar with. Make sure they have an understanding of the various chemical labeling and warning signs. Even if their job doesn't include working with these materials, they should know what to do in the case of an accidental leak or spill while they are in the area. Let them know where to find emergency showers and eye wash stations, and how to find and operate emergency breathing apparatus. Contractors should be informed as to the proper evacuation procedure during incidents, such as a chlorine spill. Not only should contractors know what to do to protect themselves when there's an emergency, but they also need to know how to protect the rest of us and the public. Contract employees are another set of eyes and ears on the job site. They may be the first witness to a problem. Make our emergency procedures and telephone lists available to them and ask for a copy of their emergency contact list. Due to security concerns, make sure contractors receive only relevant information of a utility's emergency procedures. Don't assume that contractors will automatically follow the same strict safety practices that utility employees follow, and that starts with personal protective equipment. Water plants have areas requiring the use of hard hats, safety goggles, and hearing protection. Be sure contractors know where to access the appropriate safety equipment before entering these areas. Safety shoes or boots, work gloves, and the right type of pants and shirts are important. Contractors' dress should reflect both the safety and professionalism exhibited by utility employees. Contractors should meet with a utilities safety manager before they ever start to work on site. The safety manager can outline specific job hazards and safety procedures already in place. It's also a chance to review the utilities accident investigation forms and procedures so contractors will understand what to do if there's a work-related accident. Ask contractors to provide employee safety training documentation to reduce required training time at the utility. Long-term contractor safety records should be reviewed at least annually by the utility to obtain updates on accidents, near misses, and OSHA reports. A safety manager or designated employee should act as a guide for contractors working in areas of a water utility they are unfamiliar with. A painting contractor, for example, will have little understanding of how a large pump room operates or the hazards of the machinery used in it. Most contractors should be familiar with safety practices such as lockout-tagout procedures and confined space permits. But again, utility equipment, permits, tags, and forms may be different from what they have encountered in the past. And it's just as important that contractors use lockout-tagout procedures that plant employees will be familiar with. A safety manager can ensure that contractors are following recommended work practices established at the utility. Topics for discussion may include the use of appropriate tools and the need for supervisor approval prior to the use of gas, propane, paints, solvents, welding, grinding, burning, hot work, temporary electric service, or the use of compressed gas cylinders. A utility supervisor should also be consulted prior to any work on or near fire protection or detection systems. Contractors should be informed of policies regarding the discharge of petroleum, chemicals, and hazardous materials into the sewer or drainage system. Contractors bringing or using hazardous materials onto a utility site have an obligation to inform the utility as well as provide MSDS information. In some cases, it may be necessary to provide training for utility employees exposed to these hazards. During construction projects, proper excavation support systems should be in place at all times. Appropriate protective clothing, including the use of reflective vests when necessary, should also be utilized. And although it may seem like just plain common sense to the rest of us, it never hurts to remind contractors that there will be no tolerance for removing, disabling, or altering any plant tools or safety features. Contractors are also subject to utility policies that may restrict smoking, alcohol, drugs, firearms, and other weapons, and the use of cameras and other recording devices. And finally, remind contractors that the areas they are working in are to be left in a clean, safe manner when their work is complete. We've managed to come up with a pretty long list of safety items to discuss with your contractors. Time-consuming? You bet. Worth the time? Absolutely. If your contractor is less than thrilled about reviewing your safety concerns, then you don't have the right contractor working for you. There's one other significant reason for taking the time to make sure contractors are working safely. And frankly, it scares the heck out of utility operators everywhere. Litigation.
What is the status?
Communicating with contractors about safety issues isn't enough. Be sure and document those discussions and agreements and have the contractor sign the documentation. Doing so helps lessen the liability of the utility following an accident. It also sends a clear message to the contractor about the importance of safety compliance. Most contractors carry their own liability insurance. In the event of a work-related accident or injury, the contractor is usually involved in the disposition of the case. However, this is another area where it is not appropriate for utility managers to assume. Working relationships with contractors should be discussed with the assistance of a utility's legal representative. Hold harmless and indemnity clauses in contracts may be commonplace today, but it is not up to a utility manager to determine their viability. Contractor relationships should be reviewed by legal counsel prior to arrival on the job site to protect a utility's assets as well as its reputation in the community. Maintain a file with all legal documents and contracts relating to the use of contractors. So far, we've spent most of our time examining contractor safety issues, but there's another important concern when it comes to working with contractors: security. Contractors have access to utilities that the general public does not. It potentially is an entry point for someone wishing to do harm to the water supply. When contractors arrive on the scene, we usually know very little about their background or their security policies. Just as with safety, we are entrusting contractors to adopt and participate in our culture of security. Contractors sometimes fall in the gaps of utility security policies. Neither employees or members of the general public, contractors represent a unique category. Here are some specific recommendations for security issues pertaining to contractors. Make all employees aware when contractors are on site so they have an understanding as to why they are there, what they are supposed to be doing, and when they're expected to complete the job. Require that all contractors wear photo identification badges while on the job site. Ask contractors to sign in and out so there is documentation of their presence. Conduct background checks of contractors, or at the very least, ask the contracting company if a background check has been conducted and if it is available for review. Information technology is an area of special concern. Additional scrutiny should be used when outside IT consultants are employed, since they will have access to sensitive data and operations control systems. The need for a background check of a contractor at a remote site may not seem as important as one working in a utilities plant operations center, but the threat of sabotage or terrorism at a water utility can occur at one of the many vulnerable locations. In the case of deliveries of chemicals or contractors working in sensitive plant areas, ask the contracting company to provide you with a photo of the employee before they arrive so you can compare it with their ID badge when they do arrive. Establish employee-only areas at the utility and designate whether contractors are allowed in without a security escort. Alert utility security officers utilizing cameras and monitors or patrol vehicles to areas where contractors are working so they can increase their attention level to those activities. Ask utility employees to report anything out of the ordinary when contractors are on site, and remind them that sensitive documents and equipment should be protected at all times. Lock these items up at the conclusion of each use or shift. Make contractors aware of your utility's security policies. Explain to them the need to maintain a secure environment. Let them know there will be no tolerance of interference, intimidation, or harassment of utility employees. Alert them to the possibility of inspection of vehicles, lockers, lunch boxes, and other personal items brought onto the job site. Ask their assistance in making sure doors and gates are locked as they use them. Without providing detail as to how the system works, make sure contractors understand that alarms and security systems are in place. Let them know what procedures need to be followed when alarms are tripped. Ask contractors to report any suspicious activity they encounter from employees, other contractors, or members of the public. Safety and security issues for contractors are very important at water utilities, so let's take a moment to review some key guidelines. Extend all plant safety and security policies to contractors. Ask contractors to provide you with details about their safety programs and records. Orient contractors to the hazards of your utility as well as the safety features and equipment. Make sure contractors are utilizing appropriate tools and procedures in each task they perform. Discuss contracts and litigation issues with utility legal counsel prior to workers arriving on the scene. Inform contractors of the utility's security policies and ask them to adopt the utility's culture of security. Make sure employees and security personnel know what contractors are doing on the job site. Conduct background checks when appropriate. Require contractors to wear ID badges and sign in and out of the job site. If it seems like we're asking you to ask a lot of your contractors, we are. Utility managers and employees need to make sure contractors are on board when it comes to safety and security issues. The biggest hurdle that you may run into will be time, the time that it takes to communicate with contractors. If a contractor tells you he or she is only going to be around for a day or two and doesn't have the time to talk about safety and security, you let them know it only takes a minute or so for a safety or security crisis to take place. This is time every utility and contractor can afford to take.